Thank you for joining us with the Sustainability Interest Group at Cali, PA. We are mostly Cali, PA staff, learning to be more sustainable in our own lives as we work to protect Californians and their land, water, and air, helping to make their lives better. And we're happy to be celebrating America Recycles Day this coming Friday. And I'm very happy to have a special guest, Edward Humes, author of the book Total Garbage, join us today. Mr. Humes is a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist and author of 17 nonfiction books. And let me share my screen real quick. And he covers nonfiction books covering the human stories about the justice system, science, nature, and sustainability. And his books include Force of Nature, which talks about, there we go. Force of Nature talks about the unlikely story of Walmart's Green Revolution. We have Garbology from 2012, our love affair with our dirty love affair with trash, and Door to Door, the magnificent world of transportation, covering some supply chain issues that a lot of us at Cali, PA handle, and of course the most recent book, Total Garbage, how we can fix our waste and heal our world. So, Edward Humes, it's a pleasure to have you join us today. Thank you so much for coming.
Well, thanks. I was delighted to get the invite and to learn about your group. I think what I've read and you've told me, it's a real pleasure to be joining you today.
Again, let's start off a little bit earlier in your professional career. Like I mentioned at the start, you're a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist. Can you tell us how you won the Pulitzer Prize?
Sure. Well, that was during the newspaper reporting phase of my career, and Pulitzer was for my coverage of the military. And I had done a lengthy investigation of fatal air crashes that were occurring at night, and over 70 of them over a period of years, about 165 fatalities and hundreds more people injured. And they were always blamed on pilot error, even though these usually involve some of the most skilled and decorated pilots in the services. And what I found were that the night vision technology and use at the time was flawed, and had been basically covered up by the Pentagon, which needed this night flying capability to count. This was still during the Cold War, to counter the opposing forces and to show that we had a air superiority. But the problem was the devices they were using at the time were designed for driving tanks, and the manufacturer had told the Pentagon specifically that they were unsafe at speeds over 40 miles an hour, which of course flight speeds are considerably greater than that. And when this came out, there were congressional investigations, reforms, new technology was deployed, and the old technology was grounded. And that was the centerpiece of a year of military coverage that I had done that was recognized with the Pulitzer. And that was while I was working at the Orange County Register newspaper, California.
And here we are a day after Veterans Day, so thank you for your service to those who served their country. Hopefully that saved some lives. I'd imagine it did.
Well, the human component of that, and that's what one of the other things we talked about is why I write these stories or the approach that I take. And I spent a lot of time visiting with the families and the survivors of these air crashes. And these were like widows and parents who were told that their sons and daughters had been responsible for causing these fatal crashes that killed many people. And it just wasn't true. And that I think would offend anyone's sensibilities. And the incredible sorrow take 1 minute to tell you about one combat widow I talked to who had come home from the doctor the day her husband Chris Tagurin was going out on a training flight with some great news. She had, after a long battle with cancer, was cancer free, and instead of her husband coming home, the chaplain showed up to tell her that her husband had been killed. And then she was later told that it was his error that caused it. And I got to tell her that that wasn't true and that there was going to be a recognition that her husband had not caused the deaths, and that the sorrow, that aspect of their sorrow, could be lifted, if not the grief over his loss.
And so you kind of transitioned into, I feel like in your early author career, more the justice system side of things that kind of had that similar feel of resolution, finding the murderer, or getting somebody out of prison who shouldn't have been in prison in the first place, things like that. Was that kind of an easy transition for you?
It was. I had a lot of experience covering crime in the court system as a newspaper reporter. I was in my previous newspaper job, and learning how to write what amounts to a nonfiction novel. The world of crime writing is a great way to learn how to do it. First of all, because the only place where a journalist can see someone who is like compelled to answer questions in court, it's kind of a fascinating thing for people who otherwise would say no comment to me, right?
Sure.
And then there's also there's a certain structure to the investigation and resolution of a crime that is a built-in dramatic device. And so as I went from writing relatively short articles to book-length stories, that justice system, those crime stories, were a helpful transition, because the format of them was, readers know what to expect and writers know how to structure it, and that was how I got into writing books pretty much full time.
Yeah. So then you write about the justice system, but also science and nature and sustainability. I'm curious what intrigues you about those other kinds of categories, like total garbage and garbology and those areas, or or the justice system.
It was kind of a logical path to me, although it seems like I'm all over the place too. Really, because I like to begin stories with the character, people who are doing interesting things, who've had experiences dealing with tragedy or discovery or accomplishments, whatever the story may be. It always begins with the character and that setting, or an interesting time period. And the Aristotle, thousands of years ago, defined poetry as expressing the universal and the particular. And what he meant was, a writer should find a very, singular story about a person, a place, a thing, and express a larger truth through that. And that's what I begin with. And then the subject matters depends upon what the character's doing. And I want to find something that has a greater import than just their individual experiences. I branched out from writing about crime to kind of immersion journalism, where I would embed myself in a place and write about that. First, it was juvenile court, which was part of the justice system, but also part of the social work world. And I was writing about children, mostly children in danger and dangerous children. I was working in juvenile hall as a writing instructor at the same time, and I went from that to writing about other children in a neonatal intensive care unit. And after that, I embedded myself in a high school, And so it sounds like very diverse subjects, but the transitional seem to flow from one to another to me. And um, the next place I embedded myself in was the sustainability project at Walmart. That was a partnership between the CEO of the company, the world's largest retail company, and this river guide who spent half of his uh, life living, in the outdoors, doing first descents of wild rivers all over the planet and leading expeditions. And as he got older, he also became a leadership consultant, and he turned that into one of the first sustainability consultancies in the country that specialized in that. And one of his first clients was Walmart. And it was a fascinating thing to watch. An essentially, by definition, unsustainable company try to be. I want there's obviously not a sustainable company to this day, but their goal was to be less bad, and they accomplished that. They actually made it safe for other major corporations to think about the business case for sustainability. And that was a new thing when I wrote this book, 20 years ago.
So that kind of started your thinking in a direction of sustainability where a company can put in skylights and save electricity, and improve sustainability and their bottom line. And then here you are with a book like Total Garbage that talks about reducing waste in general.
Yeah. Well, because Walmart said our biggest enemy against sustainability is waste. And so they were viewing things through the lens of waste. And that meant recycling more, or composting, or cutting fuel consumption. It was all these sustainability efforts were looked at through the eyes of reducing waste. And that's something a company like Walmart gets, right? Because they can see the bottom line value of that. And even though it took sort of years for me to process that into Total Garbage, the idea that we could view a lot of disparate environmental and economic challenges by looking at them as manifestations of waste is basically the plot and the theme of Total Garbage.
So in Total Garbage, can you share one of the lessons that you talk about that would be, specific to our group? We try to be sustainable in our own lives. So what's a good lesson learned that you share in Total Garbage that we can emulate, I guess, in our personal lives, or even, for instance, if we came into a couple $1,000s and wanted to look for a good place to spend it, sustainability wise?
Let me think about that. Well, I'll tell you about the things that I think are easiest to embrace and that have been for me, and that's particularly if I had a big bonus planning an urban micro farm. I mean, I was fascinated by the untapped potential of growing food in people's backyards or front yards, and how eliminating a wasteful thing, an unproductive lawn for an equally but differently beautiful edible yard solves a variety of problems and reduces numerous waste streams, and also has an impact on nutrition and recreation and social interaction. There's so many aspects of it that are good and very little downside unless you're in the lawn care business. You could switch that over to the farm care business. I always knew that there was a potential there, but in working on this book and seeing what organizations like Crop Swap LA are doing and other community garden efforts, I think getting buy-in from greater numbers of people and whole communities for that effort could pay dividends for many years to come. And for those, I know that home gardening and growing is a big part of what animates this group. So it may be not news to most of you that during World War II, 40% of the produce in America was produced in people's backyards as part of the Victory Garden movement. So it is possible to massively raise our game in that kind of effort in very short time. I mean, that ramp up happened over a 2-year period, so it's quite astonishing.
It does seem like
essential.
We almost forget, if a generation or 2 or 3 passes, we almost forget that. I think it was in Total Garbage that you were saying that most Americans didn't have lawns as much until World War II. Just the lawn itself, and now
that was for like really rich people.
Yeah,
and it was imported by a few of the founders from an imitation of Europe, but palatial gardens in Europe. But grass for ordinary folks would just have been insane. They had to grow food.
Ben Franklin and Thomas Jefferson would be turning in their graves or something. Saw the waste.
Well, was it not Ben Franklin, but Jefferson for sure?
Okay.
I don't think old Ben was into mowing the grass until. And then a couple of the other things that I think are easy for people to get their head around is trying to deplasticize their lives to the extent that that's possible. It's not as hard as people think in some ways, and almost impossible in others, but we can certainly do a lot better on that front. And now that we're finding out the potential health risks of plastic ingestion that are accompanying plastic packaging, I feel a greater sense of urgency to do that personally and to advocate for others doing the same. So that's kind of a low-hanging fruit sort of thing, along with the reuse and repair economy and thrifting and that sort of thing. College students can really teach us a few things about returning to those more frugal ways because they need to, but they also like to. And that's become a social endeavor itself. The thrifting universe is really cool. It's the fastest growth sector in the entire fashion industry is reuse, which is interesting and hopeful turn of events. Mm-hmm. And then the last thing is that on the resilience side is embracing and looking for ways to adopt passive house technology and practices, which in a part of the world where wildfires are going to become increasingly an increasing threat, as well as the cost of cooling and heating. Passive house construction is a really sensible investment and pays for itself very quickly, even if you're not going full. And should I explain what passive houses are?
And I guess I struggle with the things that we can tangibly do once we live in our house. To change, like, I don't know, plant a tree outside that shades in the summer and lets the light in the wintertime. Tell us more about what we can do before and or after we buy a house or get a house.
Passive homes, or ones that aspire to be, basically it's 3 or more times the insulation that a conventional American home would have, and the ability to basically seal the home and use an HVAC system to ventilate it and a heat pump to heat and cool it. The idea is the house can be open during temperate times, but that you have a filtration and ventilation system during very cold and very hot weather. Obviously, that would have had added value during smoky season when there's wildfires in the region. This, people who have these homes, and even in extreme climates like Maine in the winter, have virtually connection charge level utility bills, and that's it. They heating and cooling essentially is a pittance for these well insulated homes, and it's all about the insulation and eliminating leakage. Hard to do with an old house, very easy to do at only 5 to 10% increase in cost of construction for new construction. So it's not a big cost because it pays for itself literally within a year or two.
And I have you to thank for some of the meetings that I'm setting up in the coming month or so. Uh, where we have a meeting January 7th with the Fair Oaks Eco Housing group. Two people who, one was the architect and the other is the planner who lives there, to talk about how they were able to create this community or this group, this subdivision that is insulated so very well, and it's just in our neighborhood of Sacramento here. Uh, are you familiar with co-housing in the first place? Have you heard of that?
Not with that particular group, but in general, there's a lot more interest in this, and there's a recognition that the way we make our houses now is incredibly wasteful of energy and of money, and the new piece of thinking about resilience as the climate shifts and fire related smoke pollution grows. This really needs to be for California kind of almost a crash effort at this point to try and incorporate at least some of this technology into our homes and to make it affordable for people to do the do some of it at least as we would make we used to make solar panels on the roof more affordable. Seems like California is going in the wrong direction on a number of initiatives like that right now, but I think there's going to be impetus in the coming years to shift back because we're going to need that. And a passive house with a solar panel on the roof is basically you're living off the grid in the middle of the city, and that has value too. Earthquake country and other concerns. If we do go electric on our transportation, we don't really need much from the grid in order to do that if we alter our houses in a very relatively affordable way.
Speaking of transportation, you have a big section of your book of Total Garbage talking about transportation, and it was kind of a shock to me the direction you went with that.
No kidding, me too.
Yeah. Well, maybe I should back up. And have you gotten kind of resistance from any part of Total Garbage more so than any others in like groups like this? Any feedback? Like, really? You're recommending what?
That's the one that does surprise people the most. The transportation piece, and even thinking about the way we move ourselves and our stuff as incredibly wasteful is something that is not the way we normally think about. When we think about problems with transportation, we think, oh, traffic, or everything's so expensive, gasoline. People don't see just how wasteful system we have devised. In fact, it is our most wasteful sector of the economy is transportation, followed very closely by how we make our power. Those are the two biggest waste makers, and the stuff we throw away pales in comparison with the level of waste in our power systems and in our transportation system, and that's the hardest one for people to get. But once literally the light bulb goes on, and people see it and say, "Holy crap! This is something we can really do something about if we shift our thinking." And the place I visited for transportation was Peachtree City, Georgia, where they have a different view of how to get around. And I was very skeptical when I went there. And to set it up, Peachtree City, Georgia has basically parked their cars most of the time. They're conventional, gas guzzling cars, uh, because they recognize that the average American really only drives these massive, powerful cars uh, about 39 miles a day, and that our average uh, trip, well, actually, I take it back. 93% of the trips we take in a car are 25 miles or less. The use case for which our cars are designed to travel hundreds of miles at high speed with multiple passengers in them and cargo is a task that we almost never do in our cars, comparatively to the number of trips we take in them. So we're basically building for the least frequent use case because, hey, we may need to do it sometime. What they do in Peachtree City is they have a transportation network that's over 100 miles. It's a town of 40,000 where cars are banned from this network, and it's only walking, biking, and golf carts. And they go most places most of the time in an electric golf cart with 40 or so mile range. And that, guess what, handles 93% of their travel needs. They can go to the store, they can commute to work. It's a rite of passage at 15 and a half to get one of these things and drive it to school. The high school parking lot there has thousands of spaces for these golf carts. You see it, and the pictures would boggle your mind. And it's a more social way of getting around because it's slower, but at short distances that doesn't really matter. But if you want to pull over and have a conversation, golf cart to golf cart, you just do it. There's no traffic jams. There's no traffic crashes. It is a much more joyful way to get around. I got to this town and the mayor's driving me around and we're greeting people, meeting people, and I got there and I thought, this is all great, but a golf cart is a really crappy replacement for my car. And I left there thinking, you know what? The reality is my car is a really crappy replacement for the golf cart because that's how we get around most of the time. And so the idea that we don't most of the time need these big gas guzzling polluting cars is a really interesting one. And since 60% plus households in America have multiple vehicles, the idea that we could maybe make that second car something a little less than a car is the good enough solution that could really have a big impact on climate and pollution, and also the cost of our transportation system.
So I feel like the big resistance, I'm sure, from a lot of readers is that, well, sure, it's easy to say that, but then the infrastructure is the biggest challenge. So can you kind of take a step back and talk about how Peachtree got that to actually work in the first place? Like, how long have they had golf carts?
Well, they've been doing it since the 1970s,
Yeah.
so it's not a new thing. It's grown over time. It evolved informally with this was a town that was founded in, I think, in the 60s. So it kind of grew up with portions of this in place, with people driving across fields in their golf carts to. And it's not a retirement community, but there was one of the features of this town is they had a number of golf courses. So a lot of people had these golf carts, and they just started driving them everywhere in town. And ultimately, cities started paving this separate road system to make it easier for people to get around. And it grew until it goes to the industrial park, it goes to the school, it goes to the center of town, the restaurants. You can get pretty much anywhere. But they also allow them on the regular roads. They specifically have ordinances that allow these slower moving vehicles. And what's interesting is that there are other communities around the country that are emulating this without separate infrastructure, but by taking their existing streets, and just like you would make them safer for bicycles, they're making them safer for we're calling them now NEVs, neighborhood electric vehicles, these small format, lower speed vehicles. And the best example of that is right here in California in the South Bay cities of Los Angeles. Manhattan Beach, Redondo Beach, Hermosa Beach, El Segundo, and Torrance have all banded together to build a 250 plus mile network, not to build it, but to sign it and to permit it, um, for these kinds of vehicles. Yeah, and what their hope is that people don't have to get rid of the car. Everybody doesn't need a Tesla. Everybody doesn't need a car with 1,000 pound battery. Keep your car, but most of the time you can keep it parked. And for your local trips, are this slow speed network, so to speak, will suffice and actually be fun and solve parking and solve speeding and solve climate emissions from our vehicles, all in one fell swoop. So we'll see how that plays out, but people are pretty excited about it. And the mayor of El Segundo is going all over town, and a lot of people are doing the same in his electric golf cart.
And didn't you say there, no lives have been lost in a golf cart accident in Peachtree since the 70s?
Since ever, yes.
Yeah. So, and here we are. We have a new city being proposed, I think, in Solano County. I don't know if you've heard about that, but I haven't heard. It's a shame they haven't proposed. Like some cities are proposing shutting down the downtown to cars altogether, like inside the loop, the Beltway or whatever, just to limit it to like mini downtowns to foot traffic. But it's a shame they don't have some kind of golf cart zone or something like this new city in Solano County.
Yeah, it's a little thinking outside the box, but if you imagine the savings, the personal savings to people who, insurance and fuel and everything for that second car, as well as the infrastructure potential savings, the fatality and police savings, to slow things down for local trips and have these open air kind of simpler, easier to tend, cheaper to insure, cheaper to buy vehicles. It would be different, but it's not unprecedented. In the 1960s and 70s, the most popular car in America was half the weight and half the size of our vehicles now, the Volkswagen Beetle. It was nobody's first car; it was everybody's second car. But it's the closest analog I can see in history to what Peachtree City was doing. In 1969, it cost $1,600 to get one of those. It was cheap. It would be about $15,000 today. You can get a golf cart cheaper than that. But the Volkswagen Beetle wasn't much better than a golf cart, frankly. If you drove one around, it could, it had a better range, but it was small and it didn't do all the things your SUV can do, but it did enough. It was the best second car ever, and I think that's what Peachtree City is building on, and what other communities are hoping to do as well.
So you touched on reducing plastic in our lives. Is that maybe on the and we've talked more about what we can do in our personal lives in terms of sustainability, but in terms of global, making a difference at the global scale, what in your book do you think makes the biggest difference at the global scale? Is it plastic or anything else that you talk about?
It depends on what environmental crisis you want to address. So if we're talking about climate change, climate disruption actually is the term I prefer. Then the embrace of renewable power and getting out the most wasteful way we make energy, which is burning fossil fuels, under control is essential, and we're headed that way for reasons that I think are very encouraging, even though we have a incoming president who says climate disruption is a hoax and that what we need to do is burn more fuel. If you look at what's actually happening at the state level in very red states like Iowa, in purple states like Minnesota, the embrace of renewable energy there is substantial and growing. In fact, if Iowa were a country, it would be the second most renewable powered country in the world because the farmers love their wind. It's their most reliable crop, and they day to day they get over 60% of their energy from the wind there. So it it doesn't have to be a partisan issue. And the town I focused on this for that storyline in Total Garbage is Morris, Minnesota, which is very conservative, smallish farm town. Um, but they have gone all in on sustainability, and they partnered with local state university campus to basically put solar on every public building in town. They have solar electric buses, and this is 20% Trump country. They, their motto is at their local liquor store, "We chill the beer with our beer with the sun," and other towns around Minnesota say we want that, and they're doing it. They're forming cooperatives, solar cooperatives for these small towns, these farm communities, to go more into renewable energy. And they see, for instance, Morris is its power grid is primarily wind and solar now, and they see what their electric bills are, and they know what they were before when they were burning oil in winter, and they like what they've got now. They compost, and they're really excited about a pilot project there that the DOE is helping with at the University of Minnesota campus there to make green ammonia, which they use copious amounts of for fertilizer, which they have to have trucked in from or trained in from long distances away. This would be locally produced, carbon-free fertilizer, as well as they're playing around with powering their farm machinery with ammonia as fuel, which, of course, if it's produced renewably, is a zero carbon liquid fuel.
And we've had
That's exciting.
You talk about regenerative agriculture in your book a lot. We've had another guest speaker talking about that at another time. Very interesting to avoid the ammonia issues and just like in our own home gardens, not till the soil and just keep it where it is and that kind of thing.
I agree. Regenerative farming is the answer, but the fact is, right now, we're not going to transition to that in any way other than slowly, if we transition at all globally. But ammonia is the most manufactured chemical there is worldwide, and it also is a highly significant source of carbon emissions because the conventional way of making ammonia is incredibly carbon intensive. Even though ammonia itself is not a carbon-based substance, making it historically has been. And by shifting to renewably created ammonia, that would have a huge impact, even though it doesn't get it out of the farm system. While we're using it, it would at least be carbon neutral while we look at the potential of regenerative agriculture longer term. That's a shift that actually would save money and cut carbon emissions significantly. When I ran the numbers, I like doing analogies. I say if Iowa was a country, well, if ammonia was a country, it would be the 12th largest emitter of carbon emissions in the world. So switching that to renewably powered would be a huge accomplishment, and it would save people money as well. Makes sense.
And if California were a country, it would be the 5th largest economy in the world, and hopefully we can make a difference in our own little state.
Yeah, well, that's a whole other. That's why I'm excited about what might be happening with the producer responsibility for packaging here, because the 5th largest economy in the world uses a lot of plastic packaging, and shifting the cost of dealing with that back to the creators of those wasteful products is is game changing. And that, of course, is one of the early chapters in Total Garbage, where I look at the first state to adopt this new policy, Maine, and how that came to pass there.
And I noticed you product stewardship, also known as extended producer responsibility, was on your radar back when you wrote Garbology. You kind of touched on it just barely. So it sounds like it's been percolating. You were aware of it back then in 2012. So does it kind of take that long, like 12 years to percolate to become a book like Total Garbage, or
Well, it took me that long
process?
to go from talking about it to actually doing it, and then that triggered a wave of other states interested in doing the same thing. So I, I the idea that we were socializing the cost of weight, we sort of moving from essentially look at the beverage industry from a reusability case where producers took responsibility for the fate of their packaging and actually wanted to because their business model was to take it back and reuse it. Since glass is much more reusable than plastic and much more recyclable than plastic, it all made sense. But then when that shift occurred, when the DuPont scientists gave us the plastic bottle that didn't explode from carbonation, suddenly there was a new idea that we could have. Ooh, it's lighter. Ooh, it's easier to deal with. It doesn't break like glass. But the unspoken part was, ooh, if we do this, we can eliminate a whole cost of dealing with the fate of our packaging and shove it off on taxpayers. And that's where it's been ever since. And it was incredibly profitable to be able to socialize the cost of our packaging waste, but it was a grave policy error on the part of our state and federal governments to let that shenanigans go on. And so producer responsibility or stewardship is returning to normal. It's not some new regulation. It's returning to what should have always been there. And there was every state and Congress, there was like 1,000 pieces of legislation in the 60s and 70s to do just that. And they all failed because the beverage industry and other producers of them were better at messaging. And instead, we got litter, the anti-litter campaign that shoved the responsibility onto consumers. It was our fault that this wasteful stuff was accumulating. That's
so
what
how
Keep
did
America Beautiful so astutely did for us.
Keep America Beautiful, which was largely funded by industry, I think you talked about?
Yes. Everybody knows the famous Crying Indian public service announcement. It was on for decades. Still to this day, it's on YouTube, and people were putting comments on saying, "This is the most moving thing I've ever seen." And it was, it was like this curated garbage where you couldn't see where it came from, and none of it, and all of it was carefully curated to avoid plastic bottles. And if you ever look at that, it was all like paper. It was designed to make the packaging waste a problem of disposal and cleanup, and that's not really what the problem is. The problem is that it's something that can't be cleaned up and reused in its current form.
So, considering the industry had such a lock on this after the Crying Indian, all that marketing, etc., how did Maine break the logjam? How did that happen?
It was economic, after the, and this is when I wrote Garbology. One of America's second largest export was its trash to China, and that was 50% of our recycling system. The part that most people didn't understand was it wasn't getting recycled in any recognizable way. It was being loaded into empty containers going back to China. And that was when China in 2018 said no mas, or whatever the Chinese words for that are, their recycling systems collapsed. And suddenly what had been an income center for municipal governments, they were profiting many times, or at least it was a neutral thing to recycle. Suddenly they were paying out of the nose to um, get their crappy, unsorted, mixed use plastics and other waste into the recycling stream. The market collapsed. They couldn't afford it. These little towns in Maine suddenly were in the red because of their waste disposal costs, and recycling was shutting down, and the it was fertile ground to sell this idea as, hey, and this was the message of Sarah Nichols, who was really the driving force, worked for a nonprofit, environmental nonprofit in Maine. She went town to town and said, I make my kids clean up their mess. Why are we cleaning up this mess for the industry? They should be paying for this, not taxpayers. And that message resonated because true. First of all, because there was a strong economic motive to accept it when in the past, sort of rejected because of various arguments that it'll kill jobs, it'll raise costs. That didn't have any power when cities were going broke trying to recycle stuff. So, different times, different story. That's the power of storytelling. You tell the right story at the right time. It doesn't just inform; it changes the way people feel about things. And I think that's what happened with producer responsibility.
And I love how you kind of started the first part of your book, Total Garbage, talking about Owen's List, how Owen asked his dad, where do the batteries go? Where should they go? And his dad, I don't know. And it turns into a grassroots business for them to start taking hazardous waste to the right places. So we're doing our best with small companies like that to deal with the waste on the back end after it's already generated. And then trying to remember, talking about even just quantifying how much waste we produce. The EPA is not coming up with the right numbers, and I don't know. I'm sure you can explain it a lot better than I can, but you're really making the case that we're doing our best everywhere else, and really it boils down to the industry has to, like you said, clean up their own waste, and ideally design it so that we don't have people like Owen and Owen's List to clean up things at the back end that shouldn't have to be designed. Shouldn't have to clean up as much like that.
Yeah, you're talking about the Ridwell company that grew
right.
Owen's List, which is now in Los Angeles. I don't know if they're in Sacramento or not, but they're basically picking up the stuff that our municipal recycling systems don't, and finding homes for them. Plastic film being used by companies like Trex for outdoor furniture and decking, and so you're locking away disposable materials that are a real recycling and challenge for 40 to 50 years in a durable product form. Which is then theoretically recyclable again. So it does. It begs the question: well, why does it take a third party to come in and accomplish what our municipal systems aren't doing? But it's such a huge cost to layering on another whole method of sorting, which is why he needs subscribers to pay him to do this. And so a success for Ridwell is they get 20% of a zip code to say, yeah, we'll pay you $18 a month to do this for us. And that means that most of it's still ending up where it ends up.
Right.
Places we usually don't want it to end. So that ultimately isn't a viable solution either. But the product stewardship model provides both a stick and an incentive for producers to come up with better materials, better solutions. In some cases, embrace reuse again. Which has happened in other countries, and not so much here.
And so, meanwhile, we're eating close to a credit card's worth of plastic every week. Have you found, because maybe it's a challenge on my end, have you found a good way to communicate? That sounds bad, of course, but why is that bad health wise? I mean, you know, telling my extended family in North Texas why it's bad to see plastic bags in whales. Well, do they care about whales? I don't know. Is it bad for your health? I think the science is still you know toxics glom onto plastics and they get into your body and that's bad and it's endocrine disruptors and all kinds of. Have you found even since Total Garbage came out that?
Yes. Yeah, actually, the new edition is gonna have even more alarming information.
Oh boy.
First of all, we're consuming more than we realize in the form of nano and microplastics. So, the first thing I say is if you drink water out of a plastic bottle, you are already consuming 100 times more plastic than you would if you just drank tap water out of a glass. So, I mean, there's like things you can do right away to reduce your consumption of plastics. This every bit of science that has surfaced since the book came out has been more alarming in terms of the health potential impacts of plastic ingestion, particularly chronic plastic ingestion. Experiments with lab animals, mostly mice, with steady microplastic diets show accumulation in not only in their plaque lining their blood vessels with microplastics, but inside the brain. And at a certain level, these lab animals start to display symptoms of both Parkinson's disease and Alzheimer's disease. So the early indications are that there's a host of potential maladies that could be linked to plastic ingestion, and may already be being caused by plastic ingestion. And that research is continuing, but it's fossil fuel product. It contains literally thousands of chemicals, or is treated with, or is associated with thousands of chemicals that have never been tested for human safety. And numerous ones are known to be potential carcinogens. So that's, yes, they're microscopic amounts of plastic we're ingesting, but it's cumulative over time. I'm sure many people present today are familiar with the process of bioaccumulation and how that magnifies over time. So I personally am horrified that they're detecting plastics in amniotic fluid and in the poop of newborn babies who have yet to actually ingest a meal outside the womb. To have plastic even there is horrifying and unacceptable. and I don't know any technological solution to reducing what's already there will be deployed, but we can certainly reduce the potential that one credit card a week could become two. And I'm certainly taking steps in my personal life in order to try and minimize that exposure. And I know a lot of, I've read about other people who are doing the same, and there's a lot more people out there who are sharing this concern. So,
well, on that note, we're just about out of time, but that's I hate to end on that makes us, we're fun at parties when we talk about these kind of topics, but
yeah, it does. Well, so my book actually isn't a downer. It's all about solutions. I wanted it to be about the things that we can fix, like changing the way we source our food. And maybe that's going to the farmer's market. Maybe it's like choosing a place where you can buy in bulk. Maybe it's growing some of your own delicious tomatoes. Whatever it is, there's so many options available to us that we can embrace at the individual and the neighborhood and the community level, that I actually ended up feeling more hopeful about a number of things that I write about in Total Garbage, these crises, that if we change how we view them, if we look at them as waste, that the solutions that make sense present themselves to us. And supporting the systemic solutions like producer responsibility is another way to express that way to organize your life around solutions rather than fear.
Absolutely. Well, Edward Humes, thank you so much. We're out of time. I feel like I could keep on talking for another hour, but there you are again. There's the video again.
Okay, well, I'm closing.
Hey,
Well, it's still visible.
just to close out, to show up, show that you're human again. Thank you so much for joining us. Really has been a pleasure, really enlightening, and I really enjoyed your book. And I could talk about many of your other books as well, for this, just the science of them too. But been a pleasure, and thank you. I hope you write another book along the same lines someday.
Well, and I'd like to invite anyone present today that reach out to me by my website or through my email, which Burke has. I'd be happy to do any follow-up questions or anything else you might want to discuss.
Happy to share that as necessary. And you have,
Okay.
what is it, on X or your Twitter handle or something? Or
Yeah,
you still
I'm
do
looking
that?
more at Instagram now.
Okay.
So enamored of Twitter. So yeah, that's just my name at Edward Humes. So it's easy to find.
At Edward Humes. Okay. Well, thank you again. Take care.
All right. Well, thank you. It's a pleasure.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.